We've just gotten word of a deadly new attack by Islamist fighters in Syria. An opposition group says at least 15 people were killed in the city of Adra. Syria's state news agency called it a massacre against unarmed civilians. A US official tells CNN that the al-Nusra Front is apparently behind the killings. Well, given all of this, should the West be arming or even assisting the Syrian opposition? We're joined now by two guests. George Jabour Netto is a member of the opposition Syrian National Council, and Hala Diab is a Syrian filmmaker and spokeswoman for the Organisation for Freedom and Democracy in Syria. Welcome to you both this evening. George, let me start with you. Help me out here. I am confused by the notion of non-lethal aid. So before we move on, let me just flush this out for the viewers. What exactly is non-lethal aid? And the US and the UK, I know, is suspending it. What I understand we're talking about is weapons and ammunition. That sounds very lethal to me, is it?
Well, it's exactly non-lethal. Like, first, thank you for having me again. And it's non-lethal in terms of food rationing, equipment, satellite equipment and communication, and training. But I want to highlight this is a trickle. I'm very surprised by the noise this decision made. This is a non-factor. If it was a factor, we would have not seen the situation on the ground.
So it doesn't bother you?
So it's not
doesn't bother you?
Wasn't
worth the boxes it came in? Are you saying that?
Well, I mean, one can argue it's even, it was providing this face-saving device for the Obama administration in the UK that they're doing something to support the moderate. This trickle of support came too late. We've been talking for 2 years, support the moderate fighters. Nobody wanted fighters on the ground. But when we got to that situation, moderates needed to defend the demonstrators who are being killed. Well, support the moderates. Don't create a vacuum. Nobody listens. 2 years later, look at the disasters. Your report summarizes it all.
George, Hala is, it appears to me at least, blaming the West for its delay in getting involved. Now, look at the situation. Your thoughts?
Of course, the rise of the Islamists in the Middle East, and especially in Syria, was not actually the fault of the West not supporting the moderate rebels, because there is a thin line between what is moderate rebel and between extreme rebels, especially those fighters who now joining the Islamist groups are joining it not because they don't have weapons in the Free Syrian Army, but because the Islamist fighters are fighting on the Islamic State ideology, which sounds very attractive to many Syrians and to many Arabs. And also it is led actually by many non-Syrian fighters. We know that this Islamist group are not Syrian-oriented groups. They are, they include the Arab fighters who came from different parts of the Arab countries. And also, so it's not actually the fault of the West. It's the fault of the Arab countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, who supported these Islamic fighters, who supported Islamic revolution to hijack the peaceful democratic revolution.
We hear what you're saying, and I'll let you have another word. Hold on. George, your response.
Well, I like how it's so easy to simplify it. This was a self-fulfilling prophecy from day one. Came on this program very early on in the revolution. Assad immediately pictured it as these are terrorists, and then made these terrorists. People argue, how can a regime with so much control let thousands of people in? Many of them were in his own prisons. He used them against the US and Iraq. So I'm not here to defend Jabhat al-Nusra and the extremists, clearly. I'm against that ideology totally. And this is not why children demonstrated in the street and were shot. This is not why we lost 120,000. I would like her at least to mention the fact that one family, one person holding on despite every price, willing to destroy half of the country, bombing cities, bombing civilians. That's not.
You're talking about Bashar al-Assad's family. Let me get Hala to respond to that, because this peace conference. Oh, sorry, Hala. Let me just butt in for one moment. The solution, it seems, as far as the international community is concerned, is getting this peace conference sorted out in January now. If the SNC and the opposition parties aren't prepared to pitch up because Bashar al-Assad won't step down before it, what's the point of this peace conference? Because I know that you are looking for a political solution, aren't you?
Who are you asking me?
I'm asking Hala.
Yes, I think that more arms to the rebels group or even to the regime will escalate the situation in Syria, and that will kill the hopes for the peaceful settlements to happen in January in Geneva too. That's the only hope for Syria, is Geneva too, is political solution. The problem with the opposition, with the National Council in Syria and the military council, is they are divided. They don't have a strong political opposition that can stand on the ground against Bashar Assad. In 2014, who gonna replace him? The divided opposition, and also the military opposition on the ground is divided, and that's why it is losing on the ground. And many fighters are going to the Islamic groups, and the only way, they need to get themselves together. They need to be united. They should have defined strategy.
Okay.
They should work on the political settlement in order to bring peace to Syria.
All right, George, 1,000 days in, 2 million people living in refugee camps and elsewhere, millions displaced internally. You're still insisting as an organisation that you won't pitch up unless Assad steps down. What is the solution at this point?
The solution is a transitional government, transitional body based on.
But you're not going to get that, George.
London,
it's not going to happen at this point. So what is the solution?
Don't try to convince me. Try to convince those kids that are left in the cold.
Sure.
By the way, thank you for opening with the misery, with the saga part.
That's the story, George.
4 interviews. You're the first one to highlight this. Try to convince the millions of Syrians. Let Hala convince them that they would like to live under the dictator that bombed their own cities, and that even they're willing to live under shelling than being now outside.
All right.
$1 billion a month is the need for relief, and try to convince those people that,
all right, listen,
yeah, go back and sit with Assad.
I've got to take